Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leading in a Crisis podcast. Hey, on this podcast, we talk all things crisis management, and we like to share stories from experienced crisis leaders. I'm Tom Mueller. With me today, my co-host Mark Mullen, joining from Washington State. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Tom. Happy to be here.
And with us today, again, our friend and special guest, Destin Singleton, joining us from New Braunfels, Texas. Hey, Destin.
Howdy, y'all.
Okay, hey, that sounded very authentically Texan.
It comes
Yeah.
honest.
I'm
Right.
trying to switch from saying you guys and my normal Midwestern approach to say y'all, which seems to be more neutrally accepted when you're standing in front of a group of people doing a training session or something. So, y'all, I hope we have a really great podcast today. The subject for today, well, hang on, before I jump into that, I just wanted to throw out a quick recognition. Mark, you and I were recognized by a podcast rating company and advertising agency for the Leading in a Crisis podcast, and they actually ranked us number 5 crisis podcast for 2025. So it's always nice to get a little bit of recognition and some applause in the background for that. I'll add that after the
Right.
podcast. But congratulations to us. We're having fun, and it's nice to know people are listening and we're getting some recognition.
Right. It's nice to
It's
be
my favorite.
stretched. Okay, great. Thank you, Destin. We just moved up to number 4.
Yeah.
Woo!
It's nice
Okay.
to have a good time and learn a lot and hopefully have a positive impact in the field.
Yeah, we are. We're not the biggest podcast out there, but we are heard in 78 countries at last count. So there's a lot of people around the world who are tuning in just to kind of hear the latest on what's happening with key issues and to hear from experts like Destin and Mark and Tom on issues that are happening in this space. Well done, all. On our podcast today, we're going to talk about a kind of an interesting topic. It's around the Air India plane crash that happened on June 12th in India. Unfortunately, 270 people were killed in that plane crash. You may recall this is an aircraft that crashed shortly after takeoff, and there was one survivor from that crash, a gentleman sitting in seat. Anybody know which seat he was sitting in? 11A, be the most famous seat to sit in on a plane going forward. But there was one survivor for that, so it was a tragic thing. And Air India got out there and were communicating fairly quickly about this. They had their CEO out issuing a videotape statement that was posted out on the website for the company. And but interestingly, several of us noticed that statement sounded very familiar to us. And in fact, there's been a bit of a phenomenon running around on the internet now of people comparing the CEO of Air India and his statement to that of Robert Isom of American Airlines and his statement following the unfortunate collision between an American Airlines commuter plane and a Army helicopter over Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. Some fun video clips out there showing side-by-side comparisons. Well, as it turns out, Destin and I have kind of different perspectives on all of that. I view this as more of a tempest in a teapot, that even if they did copy the same statement that American Airlines used so eloquently, to me, that's okay as long as they delivered it empathetically and it was fit for purpose for the stakeholders that they would be talking to in India from that crash. So, in my view, this whole controversy is a tempest in a teapot. But there's a lot of others out there who are taking bigger issue with this. One of those is our very own Destin Singleton. So, Destin, tell us your take on this tempest in a teapot, as I call it.
Yeah. I'm happy to. So really quickly, my name's Destin Singleton. I am the owner of IMIC Communications, and I help my clients through change and challenge, like this kind of situation. Yeah, I actually I see this as quite similar, meaning that you've got a difference between a template and authenticity, because authenticity really matters in crisis situations. And you've heard us talk about how important it is to have plans, to have your plans in place, to have your templates in place. And that is okay to have templates that might be similar to your neighbor or might be similar to another organization in your sector. And there have been some discussion that, these folks were pulling from, templates that were provided by like an association or something like that. So I think it's okay. Templates are okay, but in this situation, unfortunately, Air India ended up eroding trust because of this statement that was perceived to be a copy or too close to another.
Mark, what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, there's an old adage that says that truth and trust walk hand in hand. And sometimes truth is pulling trust along, and sometimes trust is pushing truth along. And I think that's a little bit of the kerfuffle we ran into here is at a time when you need people to believe what you're telling them, and particularly to accept your actions or your words, it's not helpful to be immediately suspected for not using your own words. So while I see templates as valuable for all sorts of reasons, they have to be personalized. You have to be ready for what you say to have been modified enough to fit both the culture and circumstance and the person delivering it. And again, to this, it sounded like, unfortunately, both of them pulled an off-the-shelf template and used it. It sounded good the first time around. The second time around, it was noticed. And even if it is a tempest in a teapot, if it happens a third time, the penalties will be higher yet. So this, to me, at least is a clarion call to organizations to go back and look at the templates they have.
Right. Well, we'll come back to that in just a moment, Mark. That's a great call out there. But the issue around trust and that is an important one. But when I think about the stakeholders who the CEO would have been talking to when issuing that statement and subsequent communications, in my mind, those people, residents in India, families of those who were on the plane, friends, etc. Uh, I just can't imagine that they're comparing statements, from an American Airlines crash 6 months ago to this crash now. So that's part of the reason I'm saying if the statement's fit for purpose and it's empathetically delivered to, the stakeholders you're targeting, then I think it's okay. Now, the point about customizing it is a terrific one because that's an open question in my mind, right? Was that fit for purpose for the audiences they were talking to? But if I was, a family member and I heard that statement from the CEO, I would have thought, hey, he's saying the right things here. I'm hearing, the empathy and the sorrow in there, even if it was a little stiffly delivered in his case. What else, Destin? What else kind of points would you make around this one?
Yeah, there's two things that really come to mind in this instance. Especially if you look at, and in fact, Tom, let's make sure we provide kind of these videos, side-by-side videos, because they're fascinating to watch. But just delivery. Number one is delivery, and second that I'll discuss is audience. Delivery, you mentioned, so we actually were able to reach out to somebody in the region to see whether, delivery was taken in that way. And because I'm wondering if there's a cultural difference that we are perceiving this as stiff, whereas otherwise might not across the world. So always sensitive to that. But no, it was perceived that way. And so how do you, leaders that have probably been through a lot of training, how do we make sure that they're present and that they are, using all of their emotional intelligence at the point when they really need it, when they're under immense pressure? And also maybe and when you are able to view these videos, you can see also kind of the presence of the person. One is a little more relaxed and the other is a little more professionally done, maybe the background and such. So all of those are considerations, and not one of these things are the reason it was taken this way. So there's that. And then the second point I had was
Audience.
Thank you, Tom. You're taking notes.
I am.
So just really thinking about, who is it you're actually talking to? And based on our research, hopefully this is accurate, but based on our research, we have discovered that this was only delivered in English. So were we did it reach the intended audience in the intended way? And so, was that a disconnect? To me, I see several things that are kind of pointing to the end result, which was an erosion of trust.
It's fascinating to see that was only delivered in English. That surprises me for an incident that happened in India. I would have thought there'd have been a Hindi version of that and communications in local language. And maybe there was some of that more internet-based or later stuff, but this is your number one, point of communications here. This is your CEO delivering this. I was truly taken aback that we didn't see that in local language. And Dustin, sorry, to your point about the delivery, it raises the issue again of in a major incident like this, is your CEO your best weapon? Is he or she your best spokesperson? And because, we know not all leaders are good in front of a camera, right? There's just something that doesn't work. And we've seen that in various examples from incidents around the world. But yet in a situation like this with a major airline, it kind of feels to me like you got to have the CEO out there doing this. Would you agree with me on that, Destin?
Yeah, especially if that is in the sector, the norm, which is what we have seen. And, just a few podcasts ago, we praised the American Airlines CEO for his super swift and heartfelt response. And this, he knew that. And so, I don't know. It makes me wonder what happened with the communications team, and kind of how they came up with this. Had they put it in their back pocket as, hey, this is best practice. And then when the rubber met the road, they came back with that. And that is obviously ill-planned. But they were trying to do their best. I don't think they were.
Well, Destin, you raised an interesting point in a previous chat we had on this, which was, or Mark, maybe it was you. Could this have been an AI written statement? Right? Depending on how recently your large language model is updated and trained, but could this have been something that they snatched from an AI model and used it that way?
It could be, but if an AI is smart enough to write that, it should be smart enough to make sure it's culturally contextual.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't see AI in this. I see Xerox.
That was cute, wasn't it?
But there is a question about the language real quickly too. They say English is the language of business. And so everywhere you go in the world, you can speak English and get your work done. I'm wondering if English is the language of crisis response more than we realize. that in fact their world at that point in that setting was entirely focused on communicating in English. They were probably definitely talking with Boeing, probably talking with everywhere they fly and so on. And again, that's a role where it's okay for a response to be done in a single language if it helps it run better. But that's where a communicator has to step in and say, but stakeholder language is their tongue. And again, our communicators ready to stand up in a room where everything you hear is in English and advocate for the home language. And I think we can miss that really easily because we just hear everybody else in the elevator.
And maybe this was intended for a different audience.
Right.
Maybe we're reading it completely wrong.
Right. The stakeholder, shareholder audience, potentially, right? Or international investors.
Yes, the international bodies that are evaluating, airline safety across the board. So it could be. However, the main problem still exists, right?
Mhm.
An erosion of trust because of a repeat of a message that and it's in I hate to say it, it doesn't seem, if you really evaluate the words, it's very close.
Mhm.
So it's not like we're saying it's slightly close. It was very close to the previous message.
So fascinating. There's a lot of similarities in those statements. Very different delivery, though, Destin, as you pointed out earlier. And that to me just makes a huge difference. Any other takeaways from watching that side by side again?
Yeah, delivery is key. One is very straight, one is very kind of leaning in and I get it. I am an American and I am taking the American context, so I don't want to be. I do not, I know where my bias is or my blind spots are here.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do, the authenticity is coming through differently for one versus the other. So, however, what could have been done maybe physically to change that approach, if it was for an American audience, to my ear and tone. However, I wonder, as we've mentioned before, was this intended for a different audience than we were initially thinking? But yeah, delivery, huge.
Right. But again, if your audience is not your stakeholder, if your stakeholder audience is international or American or English speaking, there's a presentation style that matches that. And if your audience is your home population, there's probably a slightly different presentation. It could be down to how he was standing. It could be down to production quality of the video. At every point, if you put the two videos side by side, at every point, the delivery was better, the filming was better, the body language was better. It was like universal. And so then we're back now to that cultural cloud.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
People.
I have coached international CEOs, right?
Mhm.
And typically that is, while American is a little more casual, but international business is a little more buttoned up. But I'm with you, Mark. Was it what other aspects of it could have been adjusted slightly to just create that bit of authenticity? But it could also be tone. It could also be delivery of the words themselves. But there's still the issue of the words. So.
Right. So we kind of recognize that there's potentially, a cultural lens that we're looking at this through, and that could have some, impact on, on the authenticity of our arguments here. But a lot of experience in this room on this call, dealing with international incidents and international executives, and we pretty universally are saying he could have done a better job with that.
Right.
Hey, I want to turn the page real quick, guys, and look forward just for a minute. And this is the thought that just came into my mildly exhausted brain today. But we talked about AI just a little bit earlier. Maybe the statement was written by AI. How long will it be before we can have an AI version of that CEO delivering that statement and delivering it to perfection because it's prepped and edited by AI.
Terminator
I
comes
think
to mind.
Terminator. I think we're
Yeah.
pretty close to it. And I
Mhm.
think it is creatable now. But creating authenticity is difficult.
Mhm.
And so it would need to be trained. It requires a ton of additional work rather than just pulling something off the
Mhm.
shelf. But yeah, we're very close.
One of the challenges with delivering messages verbally is when you pick up a script, you're really picking up the persona of the writer, unless the writer is very careful to match what they write against how you speak.
Right.
So most likely all of us end up, if we don't really understand that, we end up speaking, trying to be someone else. We don't know it, but everything about the way it's written is for that other person. And that AI is not going to help that.
Agreed.
Oh, so
And
it's almost like it needs to know. I'd have to take all my writings and put it into the system and then ask AI to write something out. And that would probably be almost indistinguishable.
Yeah, but
Probably.
you train that AI though, right? You would put in
Right.
speeches from the CEO, over
Yep.
the last couple of years
Yep.
and, Q&A session recordings. And I would think, it's the whole deep fake thing, but used for official purposes, right? We're creating a clone and putting them up for public review. Well, that certainly challenges the authenticity muscles a little bit, doesn't it, Destin?
yes, it does. And I certainly, in this kind of situation, would not utilize something like that, especially if it's an AI generated spokesperson. That makes me very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But hey, AI is a tool that most of us use every day, and if you're not, you probably should. um, and it in
She's
a
looking at
crisis.
you, Mark. She's looking at you, buddy.
No, she's definitely looking at you, Tom. I can tell that.
um, and in a crisis, AI can be super, super helpful
Right.
for research, for deep research, for ideation, for reevaluating what you've already written, and especially if you have trained and this information, and then plus just future automation of processes that we spend a lot of time on, even in a crisis. So making us more efficient. So yes, AI and crisis is here to stay.
Right.
But when it comes to, um, golly, having an AI generated spokesperson, I sure hope not. I hope we never get there.
Right. One of the challenges of this is that talking about AI helping with crisis response, and I assume you're meaning creating content. It's
Yes.
easy to do that when we're sitting here and we might have just finished our cup of coffee on a nice afternoon. We're not in the 10 out of a 10 scale crisis where the lizard brains are running rampant and the stakes are high on every single thing. And I think, again, templates, AI, almost everything you plan on doing, you've got to put it into that intense, critical, your head's about ready to blow off moment and see if it plays. I'm having a hard time picturing a corporate attorney letting something written by AI go by in a reputation threatening incident unless they're very well versed in AI and they have complete trust, not just in the person that brought it, but they know and understand how you primed the tool so it would deliver what you want.
Okay, well, lots more to come on this AI conversation. Mark, you've raised some interesting points there. And I guarantee you we're going to circle back to this topic again and again in the coming months.
Um,
I think we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up there for this episode, team. Thanks, Destin, for joining us again. Mark, always great to hear your thoughts on these things. So thank you both for joining. And
Thank you.
that's And that's going to do it for this episode of the Leading in a Crisis podcast. Hey, if you want to reach out to us, drop me an email at tom@leadinginacrisis.com. Thank you again for joining. We really appreciate you being with us, and we'll see you again soon.
So I have one link